Welcome into the Blurred Wire. Today we are continuing to review some of the biggest movies that have been out in theaters. I kind of wish we had got to this one a little bit earlier because the hype on it has kind of died down. But we wanted to do the movies that kind of led up to it and everything. So we are talking about, of course, A Quiet Place, Day One. And first, gotta say hi to our co-host, Ty. How you doing? What's been going on?
Good morning, people. I'm doing good today. Today's a good day. The sun is shining. My Monstera is healthy.
Oh,
She's
that's
living.
nice. Yeah.
So I'm glad.
Yeah, yesterday my wife and I just left Florida. And God, it was storming so bad on the way home. Like it looked
Hmm.
really cool, but like you could literally see like the yellow lightning in the sky illuminating the black clouds while it was pouring. And I was like, I don't want to die, but if I do, this wouldn't be a bad way to go out.
I
Just 'cause
ver-
it looks so cool.
you very well might.
Very well, might. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's like a storm of reckoning. Like that's like
That's what it
somebody
feels
just
like,
achieved like the pinnacle of all the karma that's been
right?
in them. That's that kind of storm.
Yeah, but yeah, no, up here in Charlotte is bright and sunny too. And I guess it's down there in Florida. So yeah, it's a sign
Hmm.
of a good day and a good day to talk about a good movie. Because Quiet Place Day One, I mean, my initial thoughts, it was good. It was very solid. I think it's for fans of A Quiet Place, the first Quiet Place, this will feel like a return to form almost. Because it feels like the trailers, I feel like made the movie seem really big, like almost bigger than A Quiet Place Part Two. But as the story went on, the movie actually got smaller, which is kind of rare. Most of the time, movies will start small and then kind of go big. But
Hmm.
this one, you could tell it did the opposite of what the Quiet Place series has been doing. It started
Right.
kind of big because we saw everyone being attacked, and then it just slowly narrowed the focus onto our two main characters, Joseph Quinn and Lupita Nyong'o's character.
Hmm.
So I thought that was you could tell us what they wanted to do, kind of get back to basics. My favorite in the series is still A Quiet Place Part Two.
Right.
But like I said, for anyone, I feel like this was a return to form for a lot of people, and that's probably why it did so well at the box office.
And I think you have a little bit more liberty to do something like that when you make a movie a spin-off and
Hmm.
not quite a direct sequel of sorts, like part two was to
Yeah.
part one. You have a whole new host of characters. Even though we do have a returning character with oh what's his name again?
Korath.
Demon who?
Korath. We all know him as Korath, but I think it's
Oh,
Digimon Hansu.
Hansu. Thank you.
Mhm.
I was about to say is like, well, I do not remember his name being Morath in
Oh no,
the
not in A
movie
Quiet Place.
in the Quiet Place.
Korath.
Um,
Who?
but even and I feel like the marketing was a little bit misleading with him
Hmm.
from what I had seen. I thought he was going to be a much more integral character to this movie. He is barely in it. He is there for the
Yeah.
first little bit, and then he's there at the very, very end, and that is it. We mostly spend our time with Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, and
Yeah.
their chemistry is really good. I
Hmm.
like the dynamic between them. um, I did not care for part two. I really did not like A Quiet Place part two. I like this one more.
Hmm.
Um, it's not quite up to part one's standard for me, but I think that is just, I thought the premise was so unique and novel and cool, and I had never seen something like that from a more blockbuster movie. And I just loved it for the concept. And I don't think anything in this series would ever top that for me. So to see a movie that feels like it's trying to go back to that style or at least attempt to, you know, modernize it a little bit, you know, make it a little fresh. It felt good because it felt like they understood what at least I really enjoyed about it and kept the same idea and premise to make another solid movie.
Yeah. I think you're definitely right. Like if this was part three, this wouldn't work. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
again, when you scale up a movie, when you go to the next one, you're expected to kind of go bigger, not go smaller. I think a lot of people would have still liked it because it was still a good movie, but it probably wouldn't have worked for concluding a trilogy, if this was going to be the third
Hmm.
one. And like you said, so first of all, major spoilers if you haven't already like realized that
Hmm.
this is going to be a very spoilery episode. But like with Hans's character, I like I was expecting him to be like more in the movie, but I think they put all of his scenes in the movie in the trailer.
Hmm.
It's like we've got two scenes with him and they're going in the trailer. And and it's like, oh, he's not actually in
Literally.
it at all. Like, there's one scene that's really interesting where this guy is freaking out because the bridges are destroyed and he thinks that the people are leaving them there to die and that they're gonna get killed. And he was like about to scream, like, we're all gonna die. Like it didn't matter. And Hansu was like, no, we still gotta be quiet. And so he was trying to cover the guy's mouth, but the guy wouldn't stop making noise. And so he just killed him. Like he smashed his head against the wall in front of his child. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is gonna be extremely impactful. How is this gonna haunt him and shape his character? How is this gonna haunt and shape his kid having to watch his father kill a man in front of him in order to save his life from the scary monsters?
Right.
And as it turns out, we don't find out at all.
We don't know.
We have no idea. I don't know if that kid's scarred for life. I don't know if that kid's still alive. Like, what? We just don't know. His character. Well, I guess we saw the kid again when they were on the boat, and the kid appeared to be fine. So maybe they're just like, ah, dad killed another man. Yeah, whatever.
Or is
Life
this
goes
just
on.
another day?
Just another day.
But
Uh,
yeah, I think that's one of the big problems I had is Hansu felt so like if you took him out and replaced him with Quinn, like the character, if you just took that
mhm.
character Henry out of the movie and just put Joseph Quinn's Eric in that spot, they meet at the theater at first and then they travel together. Nothing changes.
Oh yeah,
I,
no.
I I feel like nothing changes and it feels less like why would you include someone? And that's why I don't to me, this feels like a symptom of trying to connect it to other movies and a
Hmm.
greater universe. I use that in a very small scale, that term, but it still feels like they're trying to build out a quiet place, not just in this linear path of following this family as they try to survive, but they are trying to explore world building in, because we learn a little bit more of how they got to initially landed in New York and why they may have been attracted to New York because of how natural like ambiently loud New York City
90
is.
decibels, yeah.
90 decibel at that opening that mark, and we get the bit of world building learning that they can't swim, they'll drown like nearly instantly if they get into water, like
Hmm.
and so it feels like that's just them trying to connect things that didn't need to be connected. And I think the movie suffers a little bit from it. Well, I do like to see Hansu on screen. I think he did good in the role that he was
In
given
his 30 seconds.
in his 30 seconds. It just felt pointless and it left me more confused at the conclusion
Mm.
or his inclusion than anything else.
Yeah, I think it's one of those like sometimes you can feel like a character is forced into a film. And I didn't really get that he was forced into this one. It was just kind of like, he was wasted. He got the short end of the stick. They were like, we need him to be in this, but we still want it to be focused on Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. So you
Mhm.
get like half a minute of screen time, and that should suffice so that people know what's happening in the same universe. Uh,
Right.
and it's like, the same thing. Ironically, they did the exact same thing with him with Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel because they put Korath in Captain Marvel and he had like three lines, maybe a joke, just to show that like it's connected. And it's
Hmm.
like, is that like 2021? We're still 2024, we're still doing this to Digimon Hansu? Like we're We're still just like using him as
Like,
connective tissue
please,
instead of
please, let's give him something more
he's a,
substantial.
he's a great actor. Like,
It's so good.
so that's pretty funny. But yeah, so it was still a I think the film definitely is closer to a character study, I would say, than action. Like it has action in it, don't get me wrong, but I think they spend a lot of time on the characters,
Yeah.
and the action scenes are very quick and very fleeting, which again is a huge difference between part two because I feel like those action scenes were drawn out, like they were specifically lengthened, and I feel like these ones in this movie they were shortened for a reason. Um, One thing I couldn't quite like figure out is like it seems like they all figured out that the monsters are attracted to sound and that they can't see you like really quickly. Like even in part two, when they were hiding in the at the very beginning when the monsters attacked, they were hiding um in that bar area and that
Mhm,
monster was coming by and everyone was being quiet because that's kind of like what you do like when a monster's
mhm.
around you just be quiet because even if
Yeah.
they can't see you or hear you, you know what I mean.
Right.
But it seems like they all figured out that like hey, if we're quiet it won't see us, and like in this one it kind of felt like because like she got at the very beginning of the movie, the monsters attack. She gets knocked out because like a shockwave hits her and knocks her against the wall. And then she
Hmm.
wakes up and Hansu's telling her like, "Hey, be quiet." And
Hmm.
it's like I kind of wanted to see how did they figure that out. You know what I mean? Because like once we get to that point, they pretty much always know throughout the movie they're attracted to sound. You can do whatever you want as long as you're quiet. You know, like you can walk around. Like they're not afraid to walk around.
Right.
It's like how do they know if the monsters are blind and that are only attracted to sound? Like I don't know. Like and I guess there probably was only so much time to explore it. And if explaining that would have lessened the movie or taken away from the character study, then I'm okay that it wasn't in it. But that's just one
Hmm.
of the things I was looking for, like an explanation to that I was looking to get from this movie that I thought I was going to get. Where do they figure
Right.
out that the creatures are actually blind and attracted to sound?
And I think that's something that again kind of comes from it being a sequel and it connected to other movies because we got like if we think back to A Quiet Place Part 1, we had like little not quite establishing shots but shots of like inside the house and I said almost said Jim Halpert, John Krasinski's character's like basement, like his whiteboard and stuff, and like he's trying to figure out what attracts them, what draws them. He's like sound, like he's circled sound at one point, I believe, and
Oh,
like
okay.
you could see like evidence of him like deciphering why they how they operate, how they work, so that when we understand why they're going to the lengths that they are, but we as the audience already know that. If they were to spend time doing that in this spin-off prequel, it would feel redundant just to us as the audience members, but
Hmm.
it kind of hurts them in that sense because then it like, oh, everyone is just like instantly tuned into exactly what how these guys operate. In fact, they know more than the people who have been trying to study them and survive for like over a year plus
Yeah.
out in the wilderness. We know just from like 10 seconds they can't swim, perfect, they drown immediately, and they're only attracted to sound, they can't see you. Like,
Yeah, and it's like again, it didn't have to be long, but like I mean, I guess you can't really have a conversation about it. But like it just kind of feels odd because it's like when you have these big scary monsters that again we know are blind, but you're
mm,
trying to figure out how does, Lupita Nyong'o know? And like as soon
mm,
as Digimon Hansu tells her to be quiet, she's like, "Oh, okay." So I instantly understood that not only should I be quiet, but they're actually blind and they can't see me. So I can just walk around freely. It's like I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd be like, okay, so I gotta hide because I don't want to be seen. But again, like you know what I mean? Like it's
right,
again, it's kind of a small thing, but it's just one of those things. It's like, oh, I guess she just intuitively understands. I mean, maybe it's
right.
because they don't have eyes, but I don't
How do you know that
like. How do you?
from like the
Yeah,
brief looks?
But again, that's part of the whole prequel Quiet Place. That's kind of what happens when you world build because again, like you said, as the audience, when we go into a quiet place, when we're thrust into this world in the first one, we don't need that explanation. We don't need to know how do they figure out that they're attracted to sound because we're so deep in the story. You know what I mean? We're not at the very
Right.
beginning. We're deep in the story, understanding this is the world that they live in now. You got to be quiet.
Hmm.
But when you introduce it at the beginning, it's like there's got to be a connective, information relay. And I thought it was, like you said, and I thought it was cool how like excuse me, sorry. In this movie, you could see like helicopters going overhead and they were
Right.
blasting and like
Kind
that
of
that
like
was a
drawing
very
them away.
yeah, like that made a lot of sense and that was a really smart thing for them to do. Like shows like, hey, the government's actually helping people. What a surprise. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think and again, even something there, like a scientist or someone figuring out that like it's sound that makes them they can't actually see, but they're heavily attracted to sound. And but again, like I said, if it took away from the movie, then I wouldn't have put it in. Um, it's just one of those things. I think the trailer, and I don't know if that's like a thing with trailers nowadays, but it's like explanations that you get from trailers. I think people are because the internet is so like prevalent with information and we get so much information about movies and stuff way before they come out. Like even
Hmm.
just 10 years ago, the first time you heard about a movie was likely the trailer. Like you knew that this movie was coming out because you saw the trailer. But nowadays, we know when a movie is going to be made like years and years in advance before they even start principal photography. So
Hmm.
I say all that to say I think trailers are trying to be more misleading now because they kind of need to give people some kind of expectation or not necessarily expectation, but again, because we know everything so quickly in the age of information that I guess they want to give us something that can actually still surprise us. You know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's kind of why the trailer ends up because I feel like I'm seeing more and more trailers where I get to the movie and I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting this. Oh, I wasn't expecting this based upon the trailer. Like the trailer kind
Hmm.
of shows you something different. And I'm like, is that like, why is that? Because like before, even just like 10 years ago, I feel like trailers that we got really showed you what you were getting in the movie.
Hmm.
And
Now, would
nowadays it's very
when
different.
you say that, you mean like the tone of the movie felt different from the trailer itself?
Yeah, kind of like the tone, kind of like what it's going to focus on. But
Hmm.
again, they're not going to show like there's a really nice scene of Joseph Quinn and Lupita Nyong'o that are just in the bar. Um, they're in the bar like talking to each other or not talking to each other no because they don't want to get killed they're in the
Miming to
bar
each other.
miming to each other, yeah, and I don't think anything from that scene makes it in the trailer.
Hmm.
But that scene, and if it does make it in the trailer, they chop it up really quick to make it look like part of an action sequence, like while the music
Hmm.
is ramping up and it's like dun 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 dun, dun and it'll just like
Hmm.
show us a clip of it and then go on quickly to the next one. But it's like, like if you compare a trailer for a movie that's more of a character study, most of those trailers are a lot slower, a lot more deliberate, and it'll show things like that. You know what I mean? And so,
Hmm.
like, it feels like they took like an action style trailer for a movie that ended up being more of a character study, which again can work because again you need to attract people to the theaters. The trailer definitely attracted me to the theaters. Like if we had a
Hmm.
trailer based upon the scene of them in the bar, I would have been like, it's a streaming
Hmm.
movie, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I don't really need to go see that in theaters. But it's just kind of like again it's kind of the difference, and I think part of that's because of the age of information where we know so much about stuff way before it ever comes out. So yeah, just a personal little theory on that. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So, and I guess because I was, and even with like, and I think part of it's also A Quiet Place Part Two expectations because based upon the way they shot the beginning scene in A Quiet Place Two, like that was a heavily, first of all, the cinematography on it was amazing because it was a heavily um choreographed action scene, and
Hmm.
also they did it without cuts. There weren't a
Hmm.
lot of cuts in that scene, and so a lot of them were continuous shots, which are super hard to get because everyone has to be in the right position at the very beginning and do everything perfectly right. Because if someone
Right.
messes up, you got to do the whole thing again because you can't cut away. That's why action fight scenes have so many cuts in them because you can film it 10 times and just use the best parts and cut it up and then just be like, okay, that works. Um, but with this, with a continuous shot, you can't do that. You have to show all of it. And I think for me especially, I was expecting this movie to basically just be that, but strung across an entire movie. And that's not what we got at all. Like it feels like all of that would have happened in between the time when Lupita Nyong'o got knocked out and when she
Hmm.
got woken up. Like all of
Yeah.
that continuous shot action would have happened in that moment, and we did not get it.
Right.
That's just like you said. I think this is one of the rare times where like my expectations weren't met, but I was still like, okay, this is a good movie. Like I wasn't expecting this. I came here technically to see something else. Like I wanted to
Uh-huh.
see that, but I didn't walk out being like I didn't feel the way I did after Godzilla and Kong. Like I just walked out like, okay, that was still a good movie because there's still a story here, there's still characters here, there's still things for me to follow and invest in, even though I
Right.
didn't get everything that I thought I was gonna get.
And that's funny because I walked away. I was going in much less like, okay, like I'm this far in. I guess I'll see the spinoff. I don't really like. I don't feel like I care too much if it's just going to be like part two. And then
Hmm.
it was more invested in the main character dynamic, and I walked away feeling much better about the experience because of it. Because I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, we got to just like sit with characters. Like that's great. That's what I love. That's what I love most. I get down with schlocky action, but I love most and above all else, nice character interactions.
Yeah, and I think the difference is like schlocky action, like it works if your franchise is built on that and you know that's what you do.
Mhm,
And it works if like you can't go from like a character study to schlocky action. You know what I mean? And I
mhm,
think that's what people kind of felt like with The Quiet Place. Like if you base your franchise off of character studies, and then you kind of transition into schlocky action, which I wouldn't describe part two as schlocky action, but just kind of that idea. It's like, there's a certain tone that this fits in. Like, again, Godzilla movies have never been about the characters or the story, which is why you need a lot of action because there's nothing else in it except
mhm,
for the action. So
mhm.
that's why, like I said, Godzilla and Kong, I was just like, we got some fight scenes, but it was like mainly a journey scene with Kong and this little Kong, and I'm like, that's very boring. So anyway,
Mhm.
um, so yeah, I think overall, I'm very glad that it did so well at the box office. I
Mhm.
think that means good things for part three. I think part three was going to get made anyway, but um, yeah, in Joseph Quinn, he's supposed to play. I will be interested to see how he will adapt Johnny Storm, because
Mhm.
obviously Joseph Quinn is a character with range. I haven't seen Stranger Things, but I heard he was a standout in like season three or four. I think it was
Mhm.
season three that he was in, something like that.
Mhm.
And they say that he was a standout. And then obviously he was fantastic in this movie. But he's definitely gonna have to play Johnny Storm differently. So it'll be interesting to see. So he's definitely, like I said, there are some actors out there who just kind of play themselves or play the same character over and over again, like Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson. It's just pretty much just do whatever you
Yeah.
do, people love it, and you just be yourself. Um,
Mhm.
and Joseph Quinn definitely doesn't appear to be one of those actors. But to play Johnny Storm, he's gonna have to tap into a very different personality type than the one he displayed in A Quiet Place Part One. I mean, and
Mhm.
A Quiet Place Day One, and I'm very interested to see it.
Yeah, I think for me, Lupita Nyong'o was a very big standout, and interesting enough, I learned after the fact, just looking into the movie a little bit, she really fought for this role.
Oh, really?
Apparently, she has a huge fear of cats. Like she couldn't be in a room with a cat because she was afraid of them. And obviously, this movie heavily
What?
focuses around the main character
I'm
having a
like,
cat. And
yeah.
she fought to get over her fear. Like she had someone like help her like with exposure therapy to get over her fear of cats so that she could do this movie because the role spoke to her so much.
Wow. That's actually
And
really impressive.
and like I feel like she really does an amazing job in the movie. I
Hmm.
didn't it didn't feel phoned in. Like it felt like the biggest standout to me
Yeah,
was her performance.
I definitely think it was a standout. Even the scene of them screaming and timing their screams up with the thunder.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that all goes into how powerful of an actress she really is. And again, she's one of those characters with range who can play multiple different characters.
Hmm.
Um, and and yeah, she did a fantastic job. Um, it's like it's kind of a shame that it kind of pretty much she won't be returning to the franchise. This kind of felt like a one and done, because it was such a good performance.
Hmm.
Um, but still, it'll live on. And like you said, that story about cats is very interesting. When we first talked about it the other day, I remember being like, I don't like have any pets, and anyone that knows me knows I'm not really like a big animal person. So I'm
Hmm.
like, the amount of times that that cat ran away in the movie, I would have been, especially once it came back. If it ran away again, I would have been like, it's just gonna find me again. I'll let it find me. I'm not gonna go out there with the monsters that kill me if I snap on a twig to get the cat. It'll be back. And so it
Hmm.
was very impressive how Joseph Quinn was willing to climb up that thing with the monster like breathing next to him. People really do love their cats. They really do.
Spoken like a man who doesn't have a cat.
Spoken like, so you say you would go to those lengths for pumpkin
Uh,
tie?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would crawl through fiery hot coals if it meant saving pumpkin.
Ah,
I would do it.
well, here's the thing. Pumpkin is quiet because cats are quiet. So it's kind of
Mhm.
like I wouldn't be like worried because like, they're quiet. They're paused, they observe. But anyway, I guess we could move on from that.
Speaking of sound, though, I will say I don't like it feels like the further we've gotten from part one, we've lost kind of the trend of using sound as uniquely
Hmm.
as we did there. Like again, it felt like the whole movie was built around playing with sound. And
Yeah.
here it's just, okay, be quiet. Don't have to worry about anything else. And that's all we really get in the movie. Like we have neat moments where like they're timing their screams to thunder strikes, but or lightning strikes. But it's not the same just because you're building that out in the lore of like,
Hmm.
oh, you can scream during thunder and that's fine. It doesn't mean that they did anything on the back end to make it interesting or quiet out other parts of the movie to make it feel more intense to hear thunder. It felt like thunder I had heard in any other movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that was so disappointing because when I think back to the waterfall in the first movie, like the roaring rush of water felt overwhelming in that movie just from how quiet everything else is. And it just didn't land like that. And I think that was like the thing in the first movie. That was the thing that I took away. I'd never seen something play with sound quite like that before. And so to see what I felt as like this really interesting cinematic trick and tool that they've been using kind of fall at the wayside just feels really disappointing. And I don't know if it's a like a lack of inspiration to use
Hmm.
it in different fields. I don't know if it's just the setting itself made that too difficult to try, it being in a busy city that you can't really have fully quiet moments, but it's still such a bummer to me to see this
Hmm.
like interesting because no movies were at least around the time felt like they were doing what Quiet Place was doing in that hyper specific like range of playing with sound like that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it kind of speaks to innovation and how tough it is to innovate while when revisiting a familiar concept.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of goes back to like Mad Max too. Because like the concept of A Quiet Place, that sound design editing, it was so um uh groundbreaking. You know, like the way they used lobster legs and cabbage to make the sounds of the creatures. All of it was new and innovative and fresh, and it was really, really cool. And then when you come back and do it again, like for A Quiet Place Part Two, it's like, well, it's not innovative anymore because you just did that in the first one, and
Mhm.
like it's still fresh and cool, but like as an audience, you're used to it. Your expectations are kind of raised. Like the first time you hear those creatures, it's like, oh my god, but then the second time, it's like, oh okay, because again, like you've heard them before.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of what makes it kind of tough to like fully get the same sound experiments, but I think you're
Mhm.
right because like they didn't play with the silences as much as they did in the other ones.
Mhm.
And this one, it kind of felt like they wanted to get back to more of like the jump scares
Mhm.
with the creatures like kind of leaping out. And that, like I said, the sound design can still go really well with that, but it kind of changes the focus of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, and like I said, when you think about like Mad Max and Furiosa, you know, the Mad Max was praised for its sound design because the he literally said he combined whale sounds with the roar of an engine to create some of the cars in Mad Max because he wanted them to feel alive. And again,
Mhm.
this is in the sound design era when they did this with Mad Max, because the other Mad Max movies, sound design didn't exist. It wasn't really a concept until the 90s where you could really play with all these sounds and put them in the movie.
Mhm.
And before that, when you made movies, sound design was pretty much just whatever you captured while filming the movie. So with this, you know, that was still innovative in Mad Max Fury Road, you know. But then when we got
Mhm.
to Furiosa, you know, using even the same concepts, it just doesn't, you know, you kind of get to expect that from this world. So I'm not sure if it was the same sound designer. It probably was, but I'm not sure.
Mhm.
So even if he uses some of those same ideas and combines them with like tiger sounds or whale sounds, again, it's just not innovative anymore because we already did that with Mad Max Fury Road. So I think
Right.
it's kind of sad because it's like there's there's kind of nowhere to go in that sense because like again with music you're always kind of creating something new, so that's why it's a little bit different. Like an innovative artist can continue to innovate because every album, every single, every music is a blank canvas that you're kind of starting over on. Even if you have a concept album that like continues its themes or something, but usually if someone makes a great album, you don't like follow that up with a sequel album using the same elements. But when someone
Mhm.
makes a great movie, usually studios are very hip to follow that up with another great movie using the same elements. And when you use the same elements, that lowers the innovative factor.
Well, that's why you can I think I think I disagree with that at like maybe a fundamental level because I think you can just play with it in a different way. I think you can play with it in a new way if you fundamentally understand the elements that went into it. You can refine. That's what's so great about sequels is you can it's a first is simultaneously a completed project, but it's also like a prototype of sorts because you can see what worked and what didn't. You can get out of your head a little bit and give it to the masses for other people to chime in with their input. And you can see, okay, so people really responded to what I was going for with this. So let's cut this part out, which didn't help anything, and we can just bolster this. And I think sequels of any medium can do exactly that. They can be the best that there ever was because you refined what you learned, made the first good to make it great. You'd mentioned Mad Max. I would throw Mad Max into that ring. Mad Max 2 was so much better than Mad Max 1, I think,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
they learned what worked really well at like a core level and then just refined that. And I
Hmm.
just wanted that with, hey, playing with sound was really interesting and work. And maybe, whoever was in charge, I forget exactly of part two, maybe they just had a different idea of what worked well. Maybe, and that's what they were going to focus on. You know, everybody's different in that regard. It just bums me out because that was something that made the series stand out. And now it just kind of feels solid instead of potentially being great to me.
Yeah, and I think this movie overall feels very solid. And I should have rephrased it. I shouldn't have said a sequel will lower the innovative stamp pack. I meant to say like it can
It
do
can.
that.
I
It
gotcha.
can do that when you kind of have to reuse the same elements to make something. Oh, so that was Alex Wolf who was playing Ruben. Sorry, I just pulled it up because I was trying to find
Yeah.
the sound designer.
The
So I should have said that it can, because again, you can refine it and change it, but as long as you're still using some of those same elements, and I think that's just the difference between innovative, because something could be great without being innovative at all. Like you can reuse a
100%. Yeah.
concept and make something amazing, but it's a little bit more difficult because when you're being it just kind of depends. It's like you almost have to like change your mindset because it's like when you start something as great because it's innovative, that just means it's new and it hasn't been done before and it was done well. And like, cool,
Mhm.
that's innovative. But then once
Right.
you get to the second one, if you want to use those same elements that people said were innovative, well,
Mhm.
those aren't innovative anymore because it's not new anymore. But you
Right.
have to find a way to still make it great, even if you got to use some of those same elements. And I think you're right. Like they kind of, I wouldn't say like drop the ball necessarily, but you're right. That does separate it from being solid and great. That's kind of the difference between, because this movie feels very solid.
Yeah.
And it grossed a lot actually. The budget was 67 million. Box office it hit 250 million. So that is
Yeah.
quite impressive.
Like this movie, I would totally watch it again with like my
Hmm.
family or something. Like I have no problems watching this movie. I don't think it's bad in any regard, but I don't think like for me this isn't going to be in like a top 5 of a year kind of movie. This isn't going to be like
Yeah,
a, oh man, do you remember day 1
it's not an
how
Oscar
great
darling. Yeah.
it's not going to sit in me for a very long time, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. I still can't find the um the sound designer. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was
Mhm.
enjoyable. It was solid. It's not going to be like, I remember where I was when I saw Dune Part 2 this year. Like this is not going to have that kind of impact, like where we're still
Right.
going to be talking about it, for a while after this.
Mhm.
But still very solid movie. And I would see it as soon as it comes out on streaming. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, definitely enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments if you saw this movie, if you want to see it, if you liked it, and even about the other Quiet Place movies. Day one,
Yeah.
not day one, Quiet Place and part two, what you thought about them and how would you rank them? Because I think for me, it's pretty, sorry, excuse me. For me, I guess it's probably part two, and then I guess I'd probably say Quiet Place and then day one, just because again, I
Mhm.
feel like the Quiet Place really helped set up this. But for your rankings, I'm guessing it's Quiet Place, then day one, then part two.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, pretty much.
But
Okay.
no, please tell us what you think about the series as a whole. What are you looking forward to in part 3?
Oh
What do you
yeah,
want to see taken from all of these movies to make it good?
to round out the chapter. So yeah, and we will see you guys next time.
Until then.